Okay, so you guys have given us a really interesting set of sources to dig into this time around.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be kind of circling around this one really fundamental question. How do we make learning really stick? How do we actually get that stuff to really kind of embed itself in our brains and
Yeah.
and stay there? So we're gonna take a deep dive today into all this material and try to really pull out the really key insights that are going to help you guys, whether you're tackling a new project or trying to master a skill, or even if you're just thinking about how
Yeah.
people around you are learning and how you can maybe help them learn better.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting about the collection of sources this time is we have everything from sort of broad overviews of learning principles
Yeah.
to very, very specific studies on, things like language acquisition or what's happening in classrooms.
Right.
And I think that the core question that emerges is really about the timing of instruction.
Okay.
So is it more effective to concentrate learning into these short, more
Yeah.
intense periods or to actually spread it out over a much longer duration?
Okay.
That's really the central puzzle we're going to be exploring today.
Hmm.
And as we dig into it, the answer to that question has some pretty significant implications for how you might optimize your own learning.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
One idea that keeps coming up again and again across these sources is this concept of distributed practice,
Hmm.
sometimes known as spaced learning.
Yeah.
And in the simplest terms, it just means that instead of trying to learn everything all at once,
Yeah.
like those late night cram
Yeah,
sessions.
classic cram session.
Yeah, you spread your learning out over multiple sessions with breaks in between.
Exactly. And I think the evidence that we have that supports this idea of a spacing effect is really compelling.
Okay.
I mean, this is a really well-established principle in cognitive psychology.
Hmm.
Literally hundreds of studies have shown that when you distribute your study of a fact or a concept
Yeah.
over multiple sessions, you just tend to remember it better on tests that are given later
Right.
compared to if you had crammed all of that same effort into just one block of time.
Okay, so it's not just about spreading it out. It's
Right.
it's also about having those breaks
Those breaks are really key.
in between.
Yeah. It
It's
seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
You think,
Go
oh, if I just sit down and focus for 5 hours, I'm going to learn way more than if
Mhm.
I break it up. But it actually turns out that's not how our brains work.
And I think, one of the sources points this out really well, which is in most real world learning situations,
Yeah.
you're not just encountering information
Right.
one time, you're seeing it repeatedly,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So the more relevant question maybe isn't
Yeah.
one session versus many,
Right.
but the length of those breaks
Yeah.
between the sessions.
The breaks.
So for example, is it better to have 4 meetings about a topic spread over a week or spread over a month?
Right.
That's sort of the more nuanced question we need to explore.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting
Okay.
because initially, some of the research in foreign language learning actually seemed to suggest something very different.
Oh, okay.
So there were these studies that were indicating that short, intensive language courses,
Okay.
where you're really immersed for a few weeks.
Right, like a total immersion kind of thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could actually lead to better outcomes than courses that were stretched out over many months.
Okay, now that seems to completely contradict
Yeah.
what we've just been talking about.
It does on the surface.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, so when you actually delve deeper into those studies,
Yeah.
as our main source does,
Okay.
some pretty important limitations become apparent.
Okay.
So, for instance, in some of these studies that seem to favor these shorter, more intensive programs,
Yeah.
it turned out that students in those programs were actually receiving a greater total number of instructional hours.
Okay, so it wasn't really apples to apples.
Exactly. It's not a fair comparison.
Right.
Or the shorter programs,
Right.
might have been specifically designed for students who were already highly motivated
Right.
or had a natural aptitude for languages.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
hard to isolate the impact of the concentrated learning
Exactly.
when all these other things are different
It's those confounding variables.
between the groups.
Yeah.
Right.
And crucially, many of those studies on intensive language learning only assess students' progress
Mm-hmm.
during or immediately after the course.
Right.
They didn't really measure how well that language knowledge was retained over the long term.
Okay.
And that's a key point with distributed practice.
Right.
Its real advantages only become clear when you test retention after a significant delay.
Right. It's like you can cram for a vocabulary quiz and do okay the next day,
Exactly.
but try to remember those words 6 months later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
It's not happening.
And our source highlights a really interesting study from 2010 by a researcher named Bird,
Okay.
who looked directly at this in language learning.
Okay.
And what they found was that while students in a shorter, more intensive English course
Mm-hmm.
performed just as well as students in a longer distributed course
Mm-hmm.
on a test given like a week later,
Okay.
the group with that longer 8-week distribution
Okay.
significantly outperformed the shorter duration group
Okay.
on a test that was given 60 days later.
Wow.
So that longer instructional period
Yeah.
really led to much better long-term retention.
So even in language,
Yeah.
long-term retention favored the spread out approach.
Exactly. And I think this is a really important takeaway, right?
Yeah.
Those short-term gains
Right.
don't always translate into
Right,
that
lasting
knowledge.
mastery.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like, when we really zero in on that durable long-term learning, this idea of distributing instruction over longer periods,
Yeah.
it starts to look more and more compelling.
It does.
Even in something like language acquisition.
Exactly. So then our source goes on to focus on a set of studies that met these very rigorous criteria
Okay.
to really try to isolate the impact of
Okay.
instructional period length.
Okay, so like what are we talking about here? Like what did they find when they narrowed down the research in that way?
So what's fascinating is just how strict the criteria were
Okay.
for including a study in this review.
Okay.
So they were looking at, peer-reviewed journal publications
Sure.
since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
They focused on studies that involved verbal or quantitative learning,
Okay.
where retention was measured with a test that was given at least a day after learning.
Okay.
They had to be comparing instructional periods that were longer than a single day.
Okay.
They had to be using random assignment of participants,
Okay.
and they had to control for any other potentially influencing factors. And what's really interesting is only 9 studies
Wow.
actually met all of those requirements.
Of all the research that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a surprisingly small number,
Right.
given just how much research there is on learning.
Right.
But it also means that these 9 studies offer like a really clear and focused look
Okay.
at our central question.
Okay, so what did those 9 studies tell us?
So one of the key studies they discuss
Mhm.
is by Carpenter and colleagues in 2009.
Okay.
And they were looking at 8th grade U.S. history learning.
Okay.
And basically what they did is they had students learn a month-long unit,
Okay.
and then they had a review session either 1 week or 16 weeks later.
Okay.
The crucial test, though,
Hmm.
came a full 9 months
Yeah.
after that initial learning.
Okay.
And the results were pretty significant.
Yeah.
So students who had that review session 16 weeks later,
Okay.
which effectively created a much longer overall instructional period,
Right.
scored much higher on that test 9 months down the line.
Wow.
And they even give a specific example.
Yeah.
They talk about remembering who assassinated Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
John Wilkes Booth, right?
Right.
And they found that,
Yeah.
more spaced review led to better recall even after that long delay.
Wow. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
a pretty striking finding.
Yeah, 9 months is a long time
9 months is a huge amount of time.
to retain that kind of specific information.
Right. To remember a specific fact like that.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't just about, rote memorization.
No, not at all.
Right.
Another study that they highlight by Kapler and colleagues in 2015
Okay.
looked at college students learning science concepts.
Okay.
And they had them do a lecture followed by a review session either 1 day or 8 days later.
Mm.
And then they tested them after 5 weeks.
Okay.
And crucially, they tested them with both factual recall
Okay.
and questions that required them to apply the knowledge.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So really tapping into higher level understanding.
Yeah.
And again, the students who had that longer delay before the review,
Oh.
that longer instructional period,
Yeah.
performed better on both the factual recall
Okay.
and their ability to apply
Wow.
what they learned.
So it's not just remembering the facts. It's
Or not just rote memorization.
I also understand
It's deeper comprehension.
how to use those facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
So it seems like spreading things out helps you not just remember what something is,
Mm-hmm.
but also how to use that information.
Right.
And then there were a number of other studies that they examined
Okay.
by Cepeda and colleagues.
Okay.
as well as Kipper Tetzel and others,
Okay.
that focused on learning paired associates.
Okay.
So things like foreign vocabulary words
Uh,
or trivia facts.
Okay.
And basically these studies were varying the
Yeah.
time intervals between the initial learning
Right.
and a subsequent review session,
Okay.
and then testing retention.
Yeah. At different points in time.
Right.
Ranging from a few days to weeks to even months later. Okay. So what was sort of the overall picture that emerged from all of that?
So the picture's a little more nuanced,
Okay.
but it still really strongly supports this
Uh-huh.
idea that longer instructional periods are beneficial.
Okay.
So what they found is that while there might be an optimal gap between learning sessions for a specific test delay,
Okay.
like for example, if you know you're going to be tested in a month,
Right.
there might be sort of an ideal gap for your review.
Right.
What's particularly interesting is that if the gap was too long,
Yeah.
the negative impact on remembering wasn't as significant
Interesting.
as if the gap was too short.
Okay.
So think of it this way. Like
Yeah.
if you're watering a plant,
Okay.
you need to water it periodically.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a sweet spot.
Right.
But even if you water it a little bit too late sometimes,
Yeah.
it's still better than not watering it enough overall.
Right. You're not gonna
You don't want to completely dry it out.
kill it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So generally speaking, erring on the side of slightly longer intervals
Yeah.
between learning sessions is a safer bet
Okay.
than not spacing them out enough.
Okay, that's a helpful way to think about it. And importantly, they connect this back to this idea of longer instructional periods
Yeah.
by pointing out that a long instructional period can naturally incorporate these shorter spacing gaps within it.
Exactly.
So, if you're exposed to a concept multiple times over several months,
Yeah.
the individual breaks between those exposures
Yeah.
might be relatively short.
Yeah.
But the overall time frame of engagement with the
That's-
material is long.
Yes.
And that seems to be where the real power lies
That's where the magic happens.
for building this lasting knowledge.
Yeah.
So we're not necessarily talking about these, huge gaps between every single time
Every single exposure.
you encounter something, but more about the total
duration.
over which you're actively
Okay.
learning and revisiting.
Exactly.
Okay, so all of this research obviously has some really practical implications for how we approach
Absolutely.
learning in our own lives
Yeah.
and in educational settings.
This is not just an abstract academic finding.
Right. So what are some concrete ways we can actually apply these insights?
Our source gives a few really useful examples.
Okay.
So, consider like a vocabulary workbook.
Okay.
Instead of just working through a list of new words
Yeah.
in a single week and then moving on,
Right.
you could restructure your study schedule
Okay.
so that you're revisiting those same words
Right.
at increasing intervals over the course of several months.
Okay.
So that extended exposure window,
Yeah.
even with relatively short gaps between those encounters,
Right.
should significantly improve long-term retention.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about weaving the learning into a longer time frame rather than just like a quick burst
It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
of effort.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, what other practical applications did they highlight?
They also emphasize the value of integrating previously learned material
Okay.
into new assignments.
Okay.
So, for instance, instead of just focusing solely on the current topic
Mm-hmm.
that you're studying,
Right.
you could intentionally ask yourself or your students
Right.
to compare and contrast concepts from earlier in the course.
Oh, okay.
So it's something like list the similarities and differences between humans and plants,
Right.
which would require drawing on knowledge from different parts of a biology curriculum.
Yeah.
Or, compare and contrast the American Revolutionary War and the American Civil War.
Right, bringing in
Different historical periods.
it's a historical period.
Right.
Okay.
And so this naturally forces you to revisit
Yeah.
and reinforce that earlier learning
Right.
over a longer span of time.
So for you, thinking about that new software that you're trying to master, could you see how incorporating spaced repetition into your
Absolutely.
practice sessions might be beneficial?
Yeah, and I think it's not just about the spacing.
Okay.
It's also about the retrieval practice.
Right.
So every time you have to pull that information out of your brain,
Right.
it strengthens those memory pathways.
Wait, so those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cumulative exams with feedback are another really powerful tool.
Okay.
So by including questions on material from the very beginning of a course
Yeah.
in later exams,
Right.
and then making sure that students understand and correct any mistakes
Right.
they made on that earlier material,
Yeah.
you're essentially building in spaced review
Right.
And then in subjects like math
Okay.
and other quantitative areas,
Mm-hmm.
they mention something called interleaved practice.
Okay. Oh, what is that?
So interleaved practice is a really, really effective technique.
Okay.
So typically when you're working on math problems, you tend to do like a whole set of problems
Yeah.
that are all of the same type together.
Right. All the addition problems together.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you might do like a page full of fraction addition problems,
Yeah.
followed by a page of solving quadratic equations.
Right.
And the issue with this is that you
Yeah.
often know which strategy to use
Yeah.
simply by looking at the type of problem
Right. Exactly.
you're working on.
Yeah.
So interleaved practice involves mixing different types of problems
Okay.
within the same practice session.
Oh, within the same session.
So anyway, you might encounter a fraction addition problem
Mm-hmm.
followed by a geometry problem,
Okay.
then an algebra equation.
Okay.
And what this does is
Yeah.
it forces you to actually think about
Yeah.
and select the appropriate strategy for
Right.
each problem.
It's not just, oh, I know this is an addition page, so I'm just going to add.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it distributes your practice
Yeah.
of each problem type over a longer period.
Right.
And there's good evidence to support this.
Okay. So Rohrer, Didrich, and Sturczyk in 2015,
Okay.
they showed that mixing problem types
Okay.
significantly improved test scores,
Okay.
especially later on.
And that makes sense because
In a real test or in a practical situation,
yeah.
the problems don't come neatly categorized.
Exactly. They're all mixed.
Which
By
type?
you have to be able to identify the problem and then figure out the right approach.
Okay.
So interleaving helps you develop
Yeah.
that crucial skill,
Yeah.
and it reinforces your learning over time.
Yeah. No, we've talked a lot about the advantages of distributing learning.
Yeah.
But our source does highlight one important caveat,
Right.
right? It's not
It's not a magic bullet.
universally superior in every single
Yeah.
situation.
That's correct.
Okay, so what's the caveat?
So the research indicates that
Hmm.
while distributing instruction over longer periods generally leads to better long-term retention,
Okay.
it can sometimes result in slightly lower scores
Okay.
on tests that are given immediately after learning.
So if you're facing a test tomorrow morning,
Exactly.
that intense, focused cramming session
Yeah,
might give you a temporary edge
Yeah.
in terms of immediate recall.
exactly.
Okay.
So in that very specific context,
Yeah.
preparing for a test in the very near future,
Right.
cramming might seem like the most rational strategy.
And that does explain why it can feel effective.
Yeah.
Even though we all know intuitively it's not the best approach.
It gives you that short-term boost,
Right.
but the trade-off is significant.
Okay.
The information that you learn this way
Yeah.
tends to be forgotten very rapidly.
Right.
So you might perform adequately on that immediate test,
Right.
but that knowledge is very unlikely to stick with you
Yeah.
for the long run.
So it really comes down to your goals.
Exactly.
If your only goal is to pass an exam tomorrow.
Yeah, if your goal is just to get through that immediate hurdle,
Yeah.
then cramming might get you there.
Yeah. But if you want to actually understand
You want the knowledge to stick.
and remember something,
Yeah.
then
Yes.
distributing your learning efforts is definitely the more effective strategy.
Exactly, for that durable long-term learning
Yeah,
and
nah.
genuine understanding.
Yeah.
Spreading out your study and instruction over these extended periods
Mm-hmm.
with those crucial delays between learning sessions
Right.
is generally going to yield much better results,
Okay.
especially when you're assessing retention after a month or more.
Yeah.
And the difference in terms of long-term retention is really quite striking.
Okay, so reflecting on everything that we've discussed,
Mhm.
it really makes you kind of rethink how we approach learning,
It changes the game.
both for ourselves and how we teach others.
Absolutely.
You know, it's about moving away from this idea of these really intense short bursts of study
Right.
and embracing a more gradual, longer term
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
approach.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a question for you, our listener.
Yeah.
You know, considering these findings,
Mm-hmm.
how might you adjust your own learning strategies?
Yeah. How could you apply
Your
that?
approaches to your
Certainly.
own life,
Yeah.
teaching or training,
Yeah.
to incorporate more distributed practice and longer instructional periods
Yeah.
for greater long-term impact?
Think about specific examples in your own life.
Right.
In your work, where this shift in approach
Yeah.
could lead to more lasting knowledge and skills.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway here is it's not just about putting in more hours.
Right.
It's about distributing those hours more effectively
Exactly.
over time for better long-term results.
That's the key.